Hi, Tom from buildcoaching.co.uk, and in this video we're going to talk about 3 different methods of dieting which might suit your lifestyle better than just the straight arrow calorie deficit. Now, if you've watched my channel, if you know about dieting in any degree, you'll know that hopefully you know that you need a calorie deficit to lose body fat. And the way most people do this is that they go on to some sort of online calculator, calculate their calories for maintenance, take 500 calories off that, and then what they do is they then just try and eat to those calories using like a fitness app or something else to track their food. And they try and run this as a straight arrow. Now, for some people, that does work. For some people, they can just maintain that sort of, I'm going to eat the same every single day, every day of the week mentality. But what I found with working with people over the last 10 years or so is that that doesn't work for most people. Most people don't have a lifestyle that allows them to say, well, I'm going to eat 2,000 calories every day because I can definitely do that because my lifestyle is very normal and it doesn't really change that much. Most people I work with have social lives, have family, have a busy work schedule, and often these sort of things can get in the way of trying to eat to a certain amount of calories in a day. The other thing is that a lot of people, well, actually everybody that I work with trains in a gym, and the thing about gym training is that some days, if you say do like a leg session or something like that, you're going to need slightly more calories, and some days you're going to need slightly less calories depending on what your training schedule is. So for most people who do train in gyms and do have these sort of active lives, trying to run a straight arrow, I'm only going to eat say 2,000 calories a day for weight loss, doesn't really work. So in this video, I'm just going to give you a couple of different ideas, a couple of different ways I've worked with clients and with myself, with my own method of losing body fat, and hopefully one of those, 2 of those, maybe all 3 will fit some area of your lifestyle, and it might give you a little bit of help to get your diet back on track and in order. Because what we don't want to happen is that we try and do this diet, we try and do this, I'm going to eat a certain amount of calories every day, I've got my fitness pal or chronometer or eat this much or whatever app that I'm using, and I'm going to put it all in every day, and that's going to be a nice hunky-dory. It doesn't work that way for most people, and then what happens is, because your day's gone off and you've got to say work late, or you've got to pick the kids up from school late, or they've got a party, or you've got to train, and when you come home from the gym you've got to do whatever else before you eat, and all these things conspire so that you're out of your routine. So this video is for those people who is, in my experience, is the majority of people I work with. So there's a few ways we can do this. Now, a few things to note here is that all these plans, they all will put you into a calorie deficit in some way. They all average calories over a week so that you're in a deficit. And they're all things that you can do pretty easily yourself with a macro calculator or calorie calculator and some sort of app like food tracking app. So it's not something that requires extra special skill or anything like that. Just a little bit of monitoring. I would suggest, if you're going to employ any of these strategies, that you do track your food, because we're going to be going up and down in terms of calories through the week or over 2 weeks or whatever. If you don't monitor that, very quickly you can overeat, and then obviously back to square one again. Okay, so the first method we're going to talk about is one that is quite popular, which is intermittent fasting. Now, when people talk about intermittent fasting, and you might have heard intermittent fasting and go, oh God, intermittent fasting, great. A lot of people do intermittent fasting wrong, and a lot of people get intermittent fasting confused with time-restricted eating, which we'll come on to in a minute. So intermittent fasting is where on one day you would eat more food, and on one day you would eat less food. Now that might not be like one on, one off. The schedule has to suit your lifestyle. Typical advantages of doing intermittent fasting, typical examples I should say of doing intermittent fasting, is when I work with people who are say very busy in their 9 to 5 Monday to Friday job. They're very busy during the day, so they only got time to grab a few quick snacks or whatever, and they have like maybe a bigger evening meal and they might have a small breakfast, but they basically just plow through the day. If they go to the gym, they might have a post-workout shake or something like that, and then an evening meal. So basically, through the day, they haven't got a lot of time for food. So what we don't try and force them to eat food, and we don't try and force them to have like a sit-down chicken and rice meal, for example. So a typical example for this would be if we say had let's say a 2,000 calorie target for a deficit. So let's say maintenance is 2,500 and our target for the day, as in our target deficit we're trying to stick to 7 days a week, is 2,000. What we would do instead, we would go for say 1,600 calories Monday to Friday, which actually, if you do the maths, gives you a 900 calorie deficit, which is quite a lot. Some people can't do the full 5 days straight. They do say Monday, Tuesday, up a little bit on Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday. But how you run it totally depends on you. So you would do less calories say Monday to Friday when you're really busy and you haven't got a lot of time to eat. And then what happens is on the weekend you can save up some of that food, those calories you've had, to say have a bit more. Now this works really well if you've say got kids and you go out for, like I've got kids, so I go out for the weekend. We have ice cream, and we do things, go to these places where they have all chocolate and all that sort of stuff. So I want to be able to allow myself a little bit of extra calories there, so I can enjoy the moment with my son, and obviously with my partner. So I save up more calories for the weekend and eat slightly less in the week. And this suits that sort of arrangement brilliantly. Also, if you have like a good social life, if you go out a lot on the weekend, if you're going to see family and friends and all that sort of stuff, then this will suit you as well. Because if, let's say, for example, we have saved those 400 extra calories, so we're doing 1,600. So we've got our maintenance is at 2,500. We're trying to hit 2,000, but actually Monday to Friday we're hitting 1,600. So we're fasting a little bit in that day. What's then happening is we've got those 400 calories every day, which we can save up and add to our weekend. So if you do the maths on that, that's about an extra 2,000 calories when you come to the weekend that you've got to add into your day. Now, key thing here, you don't have to eat all that food. I think it equates to about 3,000 calories on a Saturday and a Sunday. You don't have to eat all those calories on the weekend. They're there if you need them, but you don't have to plow through them. Don't feel you have to eat them. What I've noticed with people who do this is that generally they don't eat all their extra calories on the weekend, so they get a little bit of extra boost from an extra bit of a calorie deficit, and then they're back into Monday to Friday again, where they're restricting. Now, the key thing here is that what we don't want to get into is a cycle. A lot of bodybuilders get into this when they do shows, and a lot of dieters get into this. Is what they do is because their deficit is so low Monday to Friday, and the fasting is so low Monday to Friday, what happens is when they get to the weekend, it's like open doors on binging. So then they just absolutely fantasize about food all through the week, buy loads of food in for the weekend, and then it's like, Carnage City with the food and the chocolates and the muffins and everything else. I know, because this is how I used to behave. Used to really restrict myself massively Monday to Friday, and then smash the weekend. That sort of thing is not where you want to be. That's a start of a potential disordered eating, and I wouldn't encourage anybody to get to that point. So the deficit that you run on Monday to Friday, or whatever lower days you want to run, whatever you do on that, it has to be manageable for you, one that you're not putting yourself into too much hurt for, one that you definitely don't start fantasizing about food for, because when that starts to happen, that's the body's way of saying, hold on, this is a little bit too much for me, I don't like that, and I'm going to give you all these cues in order to eat loads. And what happens is when you do start eating loads, then the floodgates open, and you potentially eat back all the deficit you've created. So make sure when you're doing this, there's no hard and fast rule about how much deficit you have to be in, how long you have to fast for, etc., etc. Some people, when they do this, they employ a little bit of time restricted eating into it, so they only eat, say, like from 12 till 8 on their fasting days, for example. It's up to you. And again, I'm going to say all these methods, interchange them, make them your own. Take all these ideas and say, right, this is what I'm going to do, this and this. As long as you're in a calorie deficit, you will start to lose body fat. So that's intermittent fasting. The advantages of this is that it gives you more calories for the weekend or the days that you want to put into a high calorie day. It gives you a little bit more freedom if you're going to social events, birthdays, that sort of thing. So it is a quite good thing to employ. And you could employ this just for, say, 1 week. If you knew you had a big weekend coming up, you could eat less during the week and then go into the weekend. That's also called calorie banking. It's another method that I teach. So you would bank up the calories for that weekend, for that event. So you could do that. Most people who do intermittent fasting, what I've found is they restrict themselves massively too much on the on the low days, and then what happens is they just end up binging loads. So don't do that. Okay, make sure you're in the right balance. Okay, the next topic to talk about is time restricted eating. Now, time restricted eating is something that many people confuse with intermittent fasting. So the major difference between time restricted eating and intermittent fasting is that with time restricted eating, we're generally doing that all the time. So, for example, a time restricted eating window might be, I'm only going to eat between 12 p.m. and 8 p.m. So only from lunch through till 8 p.m. every day. And that's the allotted time that I eat. So you don't eat anything before 12, don't eat anything after 8. You get all your food in that 8-hour window. Now, there are other windows you could do, of course, and people do like, I'm not going to eat anything all day and then just eat like from like 7 p.m. onwards through till 10. That's similar to something called the warrior diet. There's loads of different things you could use here. The one that I've found most effective with my clients is the 12 till 8 window or the 12 till 7 window. That works generally well because it works for people who are, say, they're not really breakfast people. So when they get up in the morning, say if you've got like an early start. So if you start at like 6 in the morning, that's when you start work, not when you get up. If you start at 6 in the morning, potentially not that hungry at that time, and you can get away with just like a coffee. And then you just get on with your day, and then at lunchtime, then your hunger has come back. So that, okay, now we're going to eat. So it suits people like that who don't really want breakfast in the morning, not really breakfast people. Maybe start early, and they want to get a whole load of work done in the morning and just smash through before they then eat. Now, there is some advantage to doing this, and I'm not going to get into all the things about like the fasting benefits of like autophagy, and all these things about brain fog and everything else. What I would say is that some people who do this, who can do this, say that by eating in the morning, it potentially gives them a little bit of brain fog. And they normally blame it on carbs and stuff like that. Whatever it is that's causing that, eating in the morning causes them to have a little bit of a lazy mid morning. It's sometimes referred to as postprandial somnolence, so sleeping after or feeling sleepy after eating. And yeah, it does come from having carbs for the most part, which is why then you get people promoting things like, oh, have your steak and nuts breakfast, that sort of thing. Personally, I've tried all those methods, and I need to eat in the morning. If I don't eat in the morning, I find I'm very hungry by the time I get to sort of 10, 11 o'clock, and it's not for me. I'm not productive. But if it is for you, if it is something that you can do and you feel productive doing it, then absolutely do it. I had a client called Christian, who is case studies in my book. To lose weight, we employed time restricted eating. So what we did is he didn't eat anything. He had a coffee in the morning, and he drank like water or squash through the day or Diet Cokes. And then he started eating at lunchtime. And then he had an 8-hour window where he was eating. Now you may think that by doing this, you really sort of pile the food in between 12 and 8. That is possible, of course, and again, it comes down to the sort of person you are. If you're that sort of person, if you don't eat until 12 o'clock, you're going to have a massive binge, then this is not the right method for you. But if you are someone who is, gets to lunch, okay, now I can have a bigger dinner and not go crazy, then this might be for you. And the studies, the research on this has shown that in general, most people generally tend to eat less if they are in this time restricted window. So it is an effective protocol at restricting how many calories you can get in. And if you've got your 2,000 calories or whatever you're going to eat within that window, you can actually have bigger meals. So because you're not spacing them out during the day, you can have bigger meals. And a lot of people, myself included, enjoy bigger meals. Personally, my own preference is to have 3 big meals during the day now, rather than having like 6 meals, which I used to have when I was bodybuilding. because I just like eating a lot of food in one go, and then I can crack on with my work. So the method I follow isn't any of these sorts of things. It's just the method that works for me. So time restricted eating, you could do that instead. Pick the window that works best for you. So if you have, if you've got early shifts or late shifts or whatever, you might want to think about the different window. There's no magical time. Say like starting at 12, finishing at 8. It's not a magical time. You know, you could start at 2 and finish at 10 if you wanted to. You could start at 2 and finish at 8 if you wanted to. Whatever works for you, whatever works for your brain to help you control your eating, employ that. Don't look at what other people have done and go, oh, that's going to work for me. You need to try it out a little bit. And of course, you need to track the food while you're doing this to make sure. One word of advice here: if you're training, if you're exercising, lifting in the gym, I would advise probably against doing that on an empty stomach, unless, for example, you're going to go training at, say, like 11 o'clock and then eat at, say, 12:30, and that's the starting window. If you don't eat either before, like if you don't eat before and after your training session, you're potentially opening yourself up for actual loss of muscle tissue. So don't do that. That's a real thing I must highlight there. Don't train fasted and recover fasted. If you're going to train fasted, make sure you're eating directly afterwards. If you're going to, say, go through the whole day and then train and then not eat after that, which I probably wouldn't advise, make sure you do have a sizable meal before with adequate protein, so you have the protein to restore the muscle breakdown, the muscle damage after that workout. So don't train fasted and recover fasted. Make sure you've got a meal either side of that, or smack bang in the middle of the day if you're going to do that. One disadvantage of time restricted eating is potentially, if you're looking to build muscle, it can be hampering of that. One example, like I just mentioned about the training, but also because you need to have protein around about 2 to 3 hours apart, as in protein servings, and you need to get a certain amount of protein in for the day to be like optimal for muscle building, you're going to find that potentially difficult. Not everybody will, but some people will. Let's say, for example, you've only got an 8-hour window. So let's say we eat at 12, we eat at, say, 2:30, we eat at 5, and we eat at 7:30. So that's your 4 servings there, and you've got to get, let's say, 200 grams of protein in every serving. That's 50 grams of protein you've got to eat with every single meal, which isn't impossible to do. But also it's quite a lot of protein to eat. Obviously, this depends on your protein needs, what you're trying to do with your physique, all these other things. But just bear that in mind. You have to be really careful to make sure you get your protein in for those servings to maximize your muscle building. And you can do that, of course, absolutely is possible. You just got to be a bit more careful in terms of how much protein and the timing of it. Okay, so the last technique, which is something I use a lot with my clients, is called the matador technique. It's called matador because there was a study done on it a little while ago, and the abbreviation was I can't remember what all the letters were, but it was spelt out matador, and it was basically a sort of intermittent calorie feeding protocol. Now, the way this works is on week 1 you would eat a certain amount of calories, and on week 2 you would eat another amount of calories. Over the course of the weeks, you would average out into a deficit. And the way, for example, so you understand this better, let's say we've got a 2,000 calorie deficit like we had before. So with your 2,000 calorie intake, which is a 500 calorie deficit, let's just get that right. So maintenance is 2,500, and then the calorie deficit is 2,000. The way it would work is that potentially on 1 week you'll be going for, say, let's say 1,800 calories or 1,700 calories, so slightly lower again, but not as low as the intermittent fasting one. And then you've got the second week, which is the higher week. You would potentially go to, say, 2,200 calories. Now, if there's a sizable gap between these calorie amounts, the normal adaptations you would get from, say, if you're in a calorie deficit for a long period of time, the body starts to adapt to that and starts to put in place things that potentially compensate for the calorie deficit, such as slowing down your metabolism slightly, giving you hunger cues, reducing your thyroid output, all these sort of things, which then give you these cues to eat more. So what we want to do is avoid that. So when we got our low week on week 1, by the time we get to week 2 and we're ramping up the calories, those defense mechanisms by the body might have started to come in, but then once you ramp up the calories quite quickly, the body recognizes that and says, okay, fine, we've got loads more calories coming in, so maybe we don't need to be doing that, those recovery mechanisms. And so what you can do is actually get a reset of things like your thyroid, leptin, which are all the things that potentially help slow down your metabolism and give you more hunger signals. So this is really important. And the other thing to make sure is that the difference is significant. It's no point having, say, 2,000 calories one day and then 2,200 calories, one week, and then 2,200 the next week. The difference is not enough to signal to the body that it's significantly low. So the low week has to be significantly low so that you feel it a little bit, the body feels it a little bit, so that when you ramp it up, the illusion that you're having a load more calories but you're still in a deficit overall, the illusion of having the loads more calories means that for one, you get a bit more energy and a bit more energy for training, and the body also recognizes that there's more calories coming in. Again, there's no hard and fast rule here. Generally, when I employ this with clients, I'm looking at a sort of 700 to 800 calorie deficit on the low weeks, which is, that's quite high in terms of a deficit, but we're only doing it for 1 week. And then we're reverting back to maybe only a 200 calorie deficit on the higher week. So we're still in a deficit overall, but the deficit is quite low on the higher weeks. And you can actually even run it to maintenance. So you could say have 2,500 on the high week and say 1,800 on the low week. I mean, that would give you a deficit overall, but what you've got to remember is it's the average of all these weeks and the average deficit you're creating over all these weeks, which is really important. Again, what I found with the Matador method, it works well for people who can sort of right, I'm dieting for a week, and then I've got almost, they think about it like a rest week or week off, that sort of thing. The risk here is that if you drop your calories too low on the low weeks, potentially that could affect your training and your hunger and your mood and all that sort of thing. Generally, I've found that doesn't happen because it's only the 7 days, and you sort of get used to, right, I've got a low week coming up, so I'm going to dig in for this week. And generally what I find is that people tend to work harder on their low weeks because they know it's the deficit week, for example. And then when you get to the high week, the risk there is that you have to be very controlled as how much food you have, because what some people can do is they, right, it's my high week, now I can have all the food, and they stuff a load of food and actually take themselves over into a surplus. So you've got to be careful. Again, you've got to monitor these things to make sure that you're having the right amount of food and you're hitting the right calories and macros and everything else. So you do need to monitor this. The beauty of this, though, is if you get into a routine where you've got meals planned out for low week and meals planned out for high week, if you're producing those meals quite regularly and they're the same type of meals each time, you can get into a system whereby the tracking is less important because you're using the same weights for the same foods and the same meals all the time. That's something you have to develop over time as a skill, but in the beginning you will need to track that, and I can't stress that enough. Is all these techniques, they really do require tracking. It's not one of these intuitive eating things where you can say, oh, I think I need a pizza, or I don't know what my body says, am I in my low week this week? None of that. You have to definitely track it, at least in the beginning, so that you know where your levels are at in terms of food intake. So that's 3 methods that hopefully might fit your lifestyle a little bit better. The reason for employing any one of those methods is, like I've said before, is that if you run a straight arrow calorie deficit for a long period of time, eventually the body recognizes that and it starts to adapt by reducing metabolism, slowing down some of the body's activities ever so slightly, so that what it's trying to do is bring your daily activity down in line with the calorie deficit. All these methods that I talked about employ varying calorie intakes, so it doesn't allow the body to sort of establish okay, where's the calorie deficit, where's the actual the normal level of calorie intake, because there's calories going up and down all the time. So it does put off those levels of adaptation a little bit, and it does help you focus your mind a little bit more. So say, for example, if you're doing 5 days low and then 2 days high in the intermittent fasting, you've got the weekend coming up, so you've got to diet hard for 5 days. If you're doing the time restricted eating, you only have to not eat for a couple of hours a day, and then you can eat, a sizable amount. If you're doing the Matador, you've only got 1 week of low, and where you can really push it and really sort of go to your diet place or grind or whatever you need to do to get that week out of the way, and then you've got a higher week. So mentally, it's not this long, infinite trudge of calorie deficit. So it does work. They do work. And I would encourage you to sort of, if you're having trouble sticking to a calorie deficit long term, to maybe look at any one of those 3 methods to help you out. As always, make sure you take precautions with any sort of diet or anything that you're following. This is just information only. Please consult your doctor or registered dietitian or whatever before you do any sort of diet program. As always, thanks for watching. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch one of my videos. Maybe go and watch some more videos if you want to get some more information. And if this video was helpful, please subscribe and like the video. That all helps as well. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you on the next video. Bye for now.